The man who single-handedly stopped World War III. You are alive because of a man nobody taught you about. He said no. Once, in the dark, underwater, while the world above him was ending. On October 27, 1962, the Soviet submarine B-59 had been submerged in the Atlantic Ocean for days. It was the most dangerous moment of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the moment historians now call Black Saturday. American warships had located the submarine and were dropping depth charges around it, trying to force it to the surface. The charges were not designed to destroy. They were signals, warnings, the naval equivalent of knocking on a door. But inside the B-59, nobody knew that. The submarine had been out of radio contact with Moscow for days. The captain, Valentin Savitsky, had no way of knowing whether nuclear war had already begun above him. The air inside the vessel was running out. Carbon dioxide levels were rising to the point where men were losing consciousness. The temperature had reached over 50 degrees Celsius. The crew was physically and mentally at the edge of collapse, and the depth charges kept coming, one after another, shaking the hull, each explosion indistinguishable inside from an act of war. Savitsky made his decision. He ordered the preparation of the nuclear torpedo. The B-59 carried a T-5 nuclear torpedo, a weapon with a warhead approximately equal in yield to the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Savitsky's reasoning was the reasoning of a man who believed the war had already started and that his submarine was under attack. If they were going to die here, in the dark, at the bottom of the Atlantic, they would not die without striking back. He would fire. He would destroy the American fleet above them. Whatever came next would come. Soviet protocol at the time required the agreement of 3 officers to authorize a nuclear launch: the captain, the political officer, and the chief of staff of the submarine brigade. On the B-59, that 3rd officer was Vasili Arkhipov. The captain said yes. The political officer said yes. Vasili Arkhipov said no. What happened next in that submarine, in that steel tube at the bottom of the Atlantic, with the air running out and the depth charges falling, and the captain screaming and the crew terrified, has been pieced together from the accounts of survivors. Arkhipov did not match Savitsky's hysteria with hysteria of his own. He was calm. He argued. He said they had not received orders to fire. He said they could not confirm that war had actually begun. He said the correct action was to surface, establish communication with Moscow, and wait for orders. He said this in the face of a furious captain, a desperate crew, and the specific pressure of a man who is being told by everyone around him that he is wrong. He held his position. He did not fire. Savitsky eventually agreed. The B-59 surfaced. The American ships stood down. Contact was re-established. Within days, the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved. The Soviets agreed to remove their missiles from Cuba. The Americans quietly agreed to remove theirs from Turkey. The world stepped back from the edge it had been standing on. If Arkhipov had said yes, the nuclear torpedo would have been fired. The American fleet would have been destroyed. The United States would have responded, almost certainly with nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union would have responded to that response. The cascade that every strategist of the Cold War had spent years trying to prevent would have begun in the Atlantic Ocean, in the dark, because a submarine captain believed he was already at war. The subsequent death toll is not calculable. Hundreds of millions, possibly billions. The civilization that exists today, the one you were born into, the one that produced everything you have ever known, would not exist. Vasili Arkhipov said no. Once. And none of the rest of it happened. He returned to the Soviet Union. He was not celebrated. The military establishment that evaluated his conduct during the crisis criticized him for insufficient aggression, for not being willing to fire when the situation demanded it. The man who had saved the world was told by the world he had saved that he had not been aggressive enough. He continued his naval career. He rose to the rank of vice admiral. He retired. He lived quietly in a small town outside Moscow. He developed cancer, believed by his family to be related to radiation exposure during his decades of service on nuclear submarines. He died on August 19, 1998. He was 72 years old. His story was not known to the outside world until 2002, when a conference on the Cuban Missile Crisis brought together former Soviet and American officials, and the events of Black Saturday were finally fully disclosed. Thomas Blanton, the director of the National Security Archive, said it plainly. The man who saved the world was Vasili Arkhipov. He had been dead for 4 years by then. His wife Olga, who had known the story for decades and had kept it with the particular silence of a Soviet military wife who understood what silence required, finally spoke publicly about what her husband had done. She said he never talked about it as heroism. He talked about it as the only thing that made sense. "You do not fire a nuclear weapon," he said, "unless you are certain." He wasn't certain, so he did not fire. Certainty would have ended the world. Doubt saved it. He said no once, just once, in the dark, underwater. You are alive because of it.